Hey everyone, it's Gary here from Echidna Sewing. Today we're going to be talking caps and how you can do genuine baseball caps on the Halo 12 needle commercial embroidery machine. Caps are a big thing. If you are running a small embroidery business and you want to do caps, then this is a great machine for you. Really hard to do caps on home style machines properly because they do work very different to flat work. So that's what we're going to do now. I'll show you how easy it is on this guy. I'm going to take this cap off for now, but that's what we're going to do, is stitch the halo on, or the word halo, on one of our caps here. So let's just pop that over there. First things first, we're going to go through the process of how you would actually set the machine up. But even before we do that, we'll just pan across and show you the different parts of the cap frames, the frame set that you're going to need to do the caps on the Halo machine. So as you can see, there is a driver. So this is the cap frame driver, and this mounts on the machine, and pretty simple to put on this machine, but we're going to dig into that very soon. So I'll pop that back here. So that's probably the main part. We also have what we call the jig. Now the jig is the part that actually allows you to mount the cap before you put it on the machine, and without that it would be really hard to get a cap mounted on the frame. So we'll go through that in a moment. And the other parts that you're going to have is two of these guys. So you get two frames. So this is the actual frame itself. We mount the cap on there, and that goes onto the driver once we have it mounted on the machine. And you'll notice it's round. So unlike a normal embroidery hoop, which works on the flat, this works on the round, and that's how you do caps. And that's why it's almost impossible to do caps on a home style machine, because they just don't work the same way. So what else is there? Going to have some screws. So you've got these little guys here. These are the screws that actually hold the driver on the machine. And there's a few little clips here. You don't often have to use these, but on certain caps that are a bit soft and just need a bit of tensioning, we would use them, but they're in the pack. There is also a handy little instruction guide. So it tells you the steps that you've got to use to mount the cap frame driver, and we'll go through that in a moment, obviously. And there's also a couple of little extra pieces we've included. These little spacer washers. I'll show you what they're for in a minute. They don't come standard in the box, but we do include them. We've made them ourselves to make it a bit easier to mount the jig on the table that comes with the machine. So other than that, and some good caps, and here's a tip, folks. If you're gonna do caps, try and buy good quality caps. It does make the world of difference, and this is a great cap. I love these caps. They've got a structured panel on them, so they've got a buckram lining in here, and just a nice, comfortable cap to use. Good quality. Can't tell you enough. It's like if you see really cheap caps and you think, oh, I'll get them and I'm going to offer them to everyone, they can be a nightmare to stitch and mount properly. That's cheap caps. Stay away from them. Get good caps. Always helps. So that's what you'll need to do your first batch of caps on the Halo machine. So first things first, my recommendation is when you're mounting the cap frames that we actually turn the machine off, and it makes it easier to actually get to everything. So I've currently got it on. Let's just switch that machine off. Now, currently my machine is set with the standard arms on the machine. So for the flat hoops, or the tubular hoops, I need to take that off. And of course you will need a tool to do that. You've got your Allen key here, and that is the 3mm Allen key. And a Phillips head screwdriver is going to be needed a little later on, just in case we have to adjust the cap frame for whatever caps we're going to be working on. But the reason I say switch it off is when the machine is off, you can actually move the pantograph very easily. This is the pantograph mechanism here. We can move it forward and backward, cross, sideways, etc. This set of arms has to come off, and it's mounted with 3 screws just under here. It's much easier to access these screws when we pull the pantograph across. The screws are up under here, and you've just got to undo all 3. And if they're a little bit tight, I'll just get down at this level. Just use the long section of the Allen key, and you can just loosen them off just a little bit. And then once we've done that, just use in fact, I usually start over here on the left one, and just take them all off. You will not, and drop them like I did. Don't drop them on the floor because that's uncomfortable. I generally leave the center one to last. Move that back across, and there's a bit of logic for that. Take that one off. Now you don't need these screws for the cap frame, so you can put them away out of harm's reach. And just hold your frame, because as you take this off, it will want to fall away. So just keep the weight of it in one hand, take that away. So that's now been removed. The next thing we need to do is to mount the cap frame driver. Now, I'm going to refer back to the little cheat sheet that comes with the machine. And one thing I do that's a little bit different is I put the 3 screws in place first, and I find it a wee bit easier. So let's just show you what that means. So these screws, these big thumb screws that hold the cap frame driver in place, go into the 3 holes that were vacated when we took the tubular driver off. So don't screw them all the way down, just screw them in a couple of turns. They don't need to be all the way. Camera guy's got that in shot, I hope. Okay, so we've got the 3 mounting screws mounted on the driver plate there. They're not tight, I haven't tightened them down at all. They're just sitting there waiting for the cap frame driver to be put into place. So let's take the cap frame driver, and we'll point out a couple of important parts of this driver. The driver sits on the machine like this. So these 2 rollers and supports sit at the front. You'll notice you can see kind of straight through this area here, and that goes over the free arm of the machine. Now, other important parts. So these are the locking lugs, one there and one there. Now, they'll be more visible when I put it on the machine, but they are very important parts. And you just need to know that they are the main locking lugs there and there. There's also 2 little rubber stops here. And when this is locked into place, they actually sit in a particular position, which we'll show you in a minute. And then you've got also these 2 clips here, which they stop the driver from actually moving and getting out of position. If we were to unclip those, we can actually now move the whole driver mechanism backwards and forwards. But I don't want that to happen yet. We do that as we get a little bit closer, so I'll just lock them back into position. So to put it on, as I said, this part goes to the front of the machine, and we just simply move this driver arm here with the screws in it, basically to somewhere near the center over the free arm. And you'll notice there's 3 slots in the top of this plate here. They go underneath those screws. So we slide it on and just lift it, tilt it up a little bit until those slots in that plate go underneath the screws. And then just leave that sitting there for a minute. There's no need to tighten those screws up just yet. So we need to locate these locking lugs now, and they simply pull forward. So by putting your fingers or your thumbs just on this section here, holding that and pulling these locking lugs forward until they lock in, we've now locked the frame driver in. There's something very important to note, and I'll show you on the back here. So as you can see here, this little white foot here, there's one this side and another one the other side, and it actually sits in a little sort of chopped out section of the back of the arm here. So once you've tightened or pulled those lugs around to the front, which we did, they come up and engage, and that holds the unit in place. Now all we need to do is release the holding clips that stop the cap frame from moving when it's not in use. So we just simply pull that little lug out, and the one on the left, pull that out. They're now released. And what you'll find now is, providing your machine is switched off, you can actually move the cap frame left and right. So now that we've undone these clips here and we can move the frame left or right, I want to show you something very important. If we move across, you can see there's some little nylon locating screws right here, and they serve a very important purpose. They keep the track on the right sort of angle. If you tighten the thumb screws up with this out of position, what happens is it won't move freely. So you just need to make sure that those little thumb screw, or those little nylon screws, are in the center of that track before we tighten it up, which I think they are. So I'm just going to nip up one screw, move it across. It feels quite free, quite comfortable with that. And now I'm just going to tighten up the left screw, move it across, nice and free, very good. And now I can tighten up the center screw. All those screws are now tight. and my frame moves nice and freely. So that is it. We have tightened the final 3 thumb screws up. We made sure that the frame moved freely, and that's all there is to it. And truly and honestly, once you've done that a couple of times, it becomes very, very simple. You do it in your sleep, really. We've hooked the lugs in. We've undone the clips that hold the stop it from moving when it's not in use, and we've tightened the screws up. So now what I like to do is just center the hoop back to somewhere in the center, which is basically where the 3 screws should be, in the center of the machine. And we're now going to turn the machine on. So once you've powered the machine on, you're most likely going to get a message that says, resume frame origin. Now I want you to cancel that. Do not try and do it, because we haven't told the machine yet what hoop or what frame set we have on the machine. And if you click the tick button, it may try and reset to a bigger frame than you actually have on here. We don't need to do that. So just hit the little cross button, and now we're going to tell the machine what hoop we have on the machine. And to do that, you go into your design position function, which is this one down here, and we're going to click on the bottom left and choose, in fact I already had cap frames in there, so that's okay, but we would then choose cap frames, which is number 5, and then hit the green button, and now it will say set frame origin now, and I'm going to hit the little green tick and say yes. It will now move the frame and do its little sort of test to make sure that everything is in the correct position, which it is. And there we go. Now, I've already got the word halo in there, which I'm going to embroider, but I'm going to go through that loading process yet again. So we'll just escape out of that screen and back to our normal screen. Now, if you set the hat hoop into the memory first, and then you add a design, the machine now knows that you've got the hat hoop on, or the cap hoop on, and it will automatically rotate the design, because you can imagine the caps actually go on sort of back to front, so it will rotate the design. Now let's go and choose that design again. So we go to our folder option there. There's the word halo. Now you notice it's the right way around at the moment, but if I select that and then hit the little green button there, it's automatically rotated it, because I've told the machine we're using cap frames. If you don't do that to start with, and then choose cap frames after you've loaded the design, you may need to rotate the design yourself. So just get into that habit of choosing the frame first. We're all set. We just hit the green tick button, and right now the machine is ready to accept a cap. So now it's time to look at how we actually mount and load a cap onto the frame. Okay, so we have to mount the cap onto the frame, and to do that we use the jig that is provided in the kit. Now the jig is something that you can mount to a table. This is a particularly good jig. It's actually very heavy duty and is a rotational jig, which I'll show you in a minute. But in order to mount it to the table, and this is a lovely stand that comes with the machine, but the stand itself, or the table itself, is a very high density material, but it's quite a thin material. And what we have provided, just so as it actually fits a bit better on this material, is 2 of these little spacers. And these guys sit over the top of the clamps there. So you just pop them on there, and that just helps take up any of the slack on the table. So we just pop that here. Now, of course, you can put it on any table you like, and you may not need to use those little spacers if you've got a more traditional sort of wider inch thick kind of tabletop. But on this table, we found that was really helpful, because that table was a bit thinner than we would have liked. So anyway, we provide those with the machine. Now, let's have a look at this. This little guy here is a centering device. Now, you may or may not want to use that. It does have to be put onto the jig when you get the jig, but it's quite obvious that it screws into the back of this here. And you just simply position that back out of the way. Now, an interesting thing with this particular cap driver as well is it's a rotational driver. So we can actually rotate it around and position it in any position we want. And 99 times out of 100, you're going to use it as it is here. You will rarely have to rotate it around. So that's the jig. We now need to grab our cap frame, which was this guy, and we have 2 of these. Now the way this works is this strap comes around and hooks into a little sort of lug just there once we've got the cap in place. I'll show you that when it's in situation. But what we do is we just simply slide that on and mount it onto the driver first. And you'll see here, there's 3 little rocking locating lugs, if you want to call them that, and one down the bottom as well. And they actually clip into these little sort of slots on the cap itself. So, and there's also a center locating cutout right here, and that goes over this little steel locator there. So we slide this on, locate it into position, and click it on so it's actually clipped into place. So these little clips will lock in, you'll hear them lock in, and now our cap frame is actually mounted on the jig now. So what's left to do is we need to mount the cap. Now, I mentioned before, use good quality caps. I can't speak highly enough about that. As I said, these are great caps. They're buckram lined. They're just really nicely structured. They fit well, and they're really a dream to embroider on. So in order to mount the cap on here, I'm going to use stabilizer too, guys, but I'm going to put that in after I've actually mounted the cap. So all I'm going to do is fold back my sweatband, and I like to do it this way. So if I hold my sweatband, I'm going to use the pads of my hands just here to locate and push the beak of the cap back out of the way. So we hold our sweatband out, we then just simply slide this, and I put sometimes it's a better idea to actually release the Velcro strap if it does have one. I'm going to slide this back. My sweatband slides under here like so, and here's the trick to doing caps. Never let go of the cap. I'm going to take my left hand and now put it on the crown of the cap here. Let this relax, and I'm going to now slide my sweatband around, and I'm going to slide my sweatband around on the other side, and I'm never going to let go of the cap. Whatever I do, do not let go of this part here, because that's going to hold it in position for you. If you need to change hands, just swap your hands over. Now I'm going to take this metal strap that I've already released. Now you'll see it's got a corrugated or a serrated type of edge on it, and that edge sits neatly into the seam where the beak and the crown meet on the cap. And we just fold that around and just make it sit snug in the cap there. I'm also checking right now that my cap is centered, and that's what this little gadget's for. If I pull that across there like that, it tells me that I am centered. I can see now that that's right on the center of the cap, and that's kind of handy. That's all that does, is helps you center the cap. So what we need to do now is locate the little clip here onto the receiving lug on the actual frame. Now some caps will allow you to embroider all the way around the side. This one doesn't particularly, so I'm not too worried about how this is going to sit down on this side. I'm more worried about the front panel, and that's beautifully positioned anyway. So all I'm going to do is just get that out of the way, clip the little lug into place, and then pull this up nice and firm. And now my cap is fully mounted. It's quite firm. And now we can take it off and put it on the machine. Now, of course, when you're putting a cap on, guys, sometimes some caps will be thicker and the tension on this strap may need some adjusting. So I'll quickly show you on the spare frame how you do that. It's a really simple process. So this is how the cap frame would be sitting on the jig. And if you have a look down here where the actual clip is to actually tighten the strap, there is a screw just in here. And we can undo that with a Phillips head screwdriver, and we can move the position of this, the other part of the clamp clip or the strap clip, and we can move that left or right. And that will allow us to put more or less tension on the strap. And once you've got it adjusted, it's usually pretty right, but it's pretty simple. And it will depend varying on the cap that you're actually embroidering. Okay, so our cap's now mounted on the frame, and I just need to take it off the actual jig now. And remember, we've got these little clipping lugs here, so we just release those, and there's one on the bottom as well, so you just feel around till you find that, and we can just take that off. So there's our cap mounted on the actual frame right now, and we're ready to put it on the machine. So let me just turn this machine back around so as it's back in view for you, and the camera guy will tell me when. He's going okay, we're all good. So we take our cap that we've just hooped. A lot of people ask me when they do caps is, do you use stabilizer on the caps? And the short answer is, yeah, I generally do all the time. Even though there's this kind of pretty solid buckram lining in this particular cap, which is really stable, there is this seam down the center of the cap, and that seam can be quite heavy on some caps, and it can be prone to getting caught as the cap's rotating around. So putting stabilizer just prevents that from happening, and also gives a little bit more stability. And of course, the bigger the design, the more dense the design, the more stabilizer becomes super important. So all I do is I use, on this cap, I'm happy to use just a piece of medium to lightweight tearaway, and I'm going to place it in here now. So a little tip I like to do is I just use my 505 temporary adhesive embroidery spray, and I give that bit of stabilizer just a good liberal coating. And I'm a bit messy here, so don't want to get too much of it on my hands, but you just need enough to definitely hold this in place, just so as it doesn't move when you are putting your cap on. So all I need to do now is just place that where I need it, just in here. That's just going to hold it so it doesn't move, sits in there like so. And all I need to do now is I put the cap on sideways. So we're going to put it on like this and slide it around and clip it into position. So we just put the cap on sideways, either way, doesn't matter, left or right, doesn't matter. Slide it on and then just gently rotate it around until you find the location. There, remember, there are all sorts of locating points on this, and once you've got it in a position, just clip it into place and you'll feel it clip in. You can, in fact, you even heard that clip into place. So my cap is now in position, and we're good to stitch. So we have the cap in place now, and before we hit the go button, there's a couple of things we need to check. First of all, we'd already loaded our design. It has already been rotated around, and you'll notice when you look at the screen here, the embroidery area is quite large. In fact, caps can be done up to 300 by 70 mil, I think it is on this one. And but we're just doing the front panel there. I am going to check it for center, and remember, once we've got a design in place, we can we can trace the design. Now, this machine has got an LED pointer, but I don't recommend using the LED as a reference guide on caps because they're so much higher than normal work. Remember, a cap is curved, so your LED pointer is not going to be as accurate as on a flat piece of fabric. So use your eye. When I'm testing to see where something is going to stitch, I like to go to needle 1. So if you don't recall how we do that, I'm just going to escape out of that screen and go to my needles, and I'm going to select needle 1. And we'll just lift our needle guard up for a minute just so we can see it. And I know, and I purposely did this, I'm actually off center. So I can see if I pull my needle down, I'm nowhere near the center of my cap. There's my seam and my needle is to the left. So all I need to do to correct that, we'll just get out of that needle selection option. We'll go to our frame or our hoop option or our move options, and I'm just going to very gently move the frame until my cap is centered where I want it. And it's really an eyeball thing now, and I'm looking down there, and you know what, that's pretty good. Maybe back just a smidgen. So I know that's good, and I'm ready to go. I do need to select the color I'm going to use, and in this cap, because it's a maroon cap, I'm actually going to stitch with white thread. I happen to know that the white is on, what's that, 5, 6, 7, needle 8. So I'm going to go in, and interestingly, I could go ahead into my color palette setting here and just simply, we'll just click that. There's only one color in the design. It is just a one color design. I'm going to choose white. So I can set it to go automatic, or I could just turn into manual mode and choose needle 8. But we've set it for automatic, so it knows it's going to choose needle 8 now. Click the go button. We're all good to go. The cap is rotated, or the design is rotated. I am just going to frame it out though. So just, let's go back into our hoop options here. There's our framing button there. So I'm just going to choose that. It will now trace around where that is going to stitch. That's fine. Now, another interesting thing too is that taking just a normally digitized design and stitching on a cap won't always work. And it often will, but it won't always work. I've actually digitized the word halo to go center out. So it's starting in the center and embroidering out. And the reason for that is there's a lot more slack in the caps, if you like, than on a traditional hoop. And if you stitch from one side to the other, you can tend to push the fabric, and you get kind of a bulge at one end of the cap. So it's a good idea to have a design digitized for caps, but not absolutely necessary, but it does actually work better. So we're going to stitch this out now. I can move it. I might move it a little bit closer to the top of the cap. So I'm getting a bit closer to the beak of the cap. If I wanted to test that out again, just hit the frame button, rotates around, And I think we're good to go. So we can just escape out of that. We are still in edit mode. So to go to embroidery mode, we just click the little red needle button and accept that. And now it's good to go. So let's hit the start button. Okay, so the cap is finished. So we're going to take that off, and then I'm going to show you how to go back to using your normal frame, taking the cap frame off, and then obviously putting back the normal frame set on. So once it's done, it's stopped back in the center. All we need to do is release the little locking lugs, 2 on the top, 1 either side, sorry, 2 on the sides and 1 underneath, and then just pull that forward, turn it around, and there's our cap. I've got one little tiny bit of thread to trim there, but not too much. And that's all done. So to release the cap off the frame, you just simply let go of the strap lug there, pull that back around, the cap will just come off. I can pop this back. I usually just hook this back on so as that strap's not sort of sitting all over the place. Get rid of that. Have a look underneath. So there's my stabilizer underneath. All that's left to do is tear that away. It was just a tear away, so. And again, it didn't particularly add a lot of stability. It didn't need to because we've got the buckram lining, but it did protect on that center seam, stopped it from potentially getting caught anywhere. And we can just fold that back up. And I will get a pair of snips and just get one little bit of thread. Actually, I could pull it away myself. There we go. Got one tiny little bit to get rid of, but that's not too bad. Anyway, that's as easy as it is to do caps. Now, obviously, if you put a really complex design on a cap, it's going to take longer to stitch, and you'll use the same processes as you would for normal embroidery. You'd set your colors and everything. But a little tip, for the best results on caps, you don't want a really complicated, detailed design, because it's harder to stitch a cap and get that detail than it is, say, a normal flat piece of fabric. And that's because of the structure of the cap and the fact that it's working on the round, and it's just different. So simplicity is best, and let's face it, most caps, you just want to have a really nice looking, stunning design on there. So keep it simple. That's your best option. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, converting back, once we've finished the design, just go back to edit mode. So simply click the little blue button there, and that says change to edit mode. Now remember, once we've changed back to edit mode, you can't accidentally get the machine stitching. It's out of embroidery mode now. And the best way to take the cap frame off the machine is actually to switch the machine off. So at that point, you can now freely move the frame around. So it's really just doing the reverse of what we did to set the design, set the cap frame into position. So the first thing to do is just loosen the screws off, and you can push the driver across to the left, just loosen them off a couple of turns. Don't take them out just yet. And once you've got those loosened, just center the driver back again. And whoops, get that centered back there again. Now we do have to get in, and at this point, with that centered, we can reposition these little locating tabs here. So the little metal locks that lock the frame into positions for when you're not using it, just push those back in. You can only do that if the cap frame is centered. And then it's just a matter of releasing the locating lugs or the holding lugs on the bottom here. So to release these, you just need to put your fingers on like that and then pull them all the way around. They are quite tight, guys. So if you feel like you're not going to break anything, but they are tight, they're meant to be tight, because if they weren't tight, they wouldn't hold it in position. So they do take a bit of effort. And then just slide the whole unit off, and that's your cap frame. All that's left to do is now take the thumb screws away that were holding the cap frame on, which I still have not done. So I'll just quickly remove those guys. And you can move your arm. In fact, you're going to want to move it to put the frame back on, the standard frame back on anyway. And once you've got these screws off, we're good to put this guy back on. So I've got my normal embroidery arm for my tubular frames here. I've got the 3 screws that held it on. I've got my Allen key. And all that needs to happen now is, the easiest way to do this actually, quick tip, pop one of the screws on top of the Allen key like so. hold this in position, and I'm going to put it here and then just screw up from underneath. And once you've got it started, you can just let go, it's started, and then we can just move that across a bit so as we can access all the screws. Pop the screw in the Allen key into the screw. Do the same thing for the next one. And then the following screw. It's much easier to do this than fiddle with your fingers trying to get the screw up into position. And once you've got that started, you can just nip it up. Now, you don't really need to set anything here. It will automatically locate itself. And we'll do the next one. And you don't have to swing on these so that they're too tight, but of course they do need to be reasonably firm. And what I like to do is just use the Allen key vertically to do that, and then just one quick nip with a bit more leverage on the length of the Allen key. And remember, my machine is switched off. So that's now back on, and we can then just push your embroidery back somewhere into center, switch the machine on, and you're back into normal sewing mode or embroidery mode. Remember, you do just need to go and choose the hoop that you're going to use next, like you would on any design. But that's the process of putting on the cap frame, taking the cap frame off, doing a quick cap. Let's have a look how it turned out. So as you can see, we'll just put that back on. There we go. A halo cap, all done. Pretty simple. Have fun, enjoy. Cheers.